People, we are live. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Sarah, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, thank you.
It has been a while, so I'm so
Yes,
glad that
I had
we,
to move and everything. Yeah.
we get be back to do this again. I think this is fun. I think it's interesting also.
I
So
like it too.
so we hope that we have audience follow us to watch this. I'll bring up the banner. So this this is this is the topic that we are going to talk about today. Um, we talk about our founding father, John Adams. So we are ready to talk about that. So let me quickly introduce you, Rick. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for showing up and joining us today. I am happy to host my fellow author, Rick Rhodes, today. And with the history chat that we call our show History Chat today. My name is Sarah M., and I am an author of the book How I Survived the Killing Fields. But today I'm not talking about my book. I'm going to have Rick talk about a more important person in the United States. So let me introduce our speaker, our presenter today. Our presenter today is a 10-time nonfiction book author and an authority on American history. His number 10 book is called They Made America Great. He spent most of his adult life living aboard boats and has traveled far and wide in the Americas. Let's welcome Rick Road. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
So glad that we can do this again.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So today's topic is we will be talking about our founding father, John Adams. Most Americans are aware of our founding father, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. Often somewhat overlooked is our second president and first vice president, John Adams. This afternoon, you are going to try to rectify that. I can't wait to hear more about John Adams. Take it away, Rick.
And I can't wait to tell you. Yeah, he's overlooked a lot, I think. He helped create the Constitution in 1787. He was our nation's first vice president and uh, second president. Uh, he was elected only by the Electoral College by then in 1896, 1796, excuse me. And like all founding fathers, he believed in principle was the guiding. He believed in reason was the guiding principle, and historians have often praised him for his integrity and in honesty. David McCullough, I read a book by him recently last month, calls him brilliant, fiercely independent, often irascible, always honest Yankee patriot who spared nothing in his zeal for the American Revolution. He never walked away from work that needed doing. He never failed to speak his mind when it counted, and he took a stand and fought for what he believed in. He was born in a small town outside of Boston in 1735. He lived on a farm and had an insatiable appetite for reading. This is before he went to Harvard. He got a scholarship there when he was 16 years old. His father was a preacher, and they thought John Adams may want to be a preacher too. But John Adams was not impressed with the preachers that came to his father's house. He thought they were full of it, too dogmatic and too inflexible. Uh, at Harvard, he joined a debating club, and he figured he would make a good preacher, but he liked lawyering instead. And even in those days, almost like it is today, being a lawyer is not the highest honorable profession. But he was pretty honorable, and he became a lawyer and married his sweetheart, who was his intellectual equal. Abigail Adams in 1764. As a lawyer, he didn't specialize in everything. He did everything from assault and battery to tarring and feathering, debtors' cases, smuggling. He saw every side of life, and he learned to see things as they were. And this was a big advantage for his future life. He didn't. He understood the underbelly of society and was honest with it. And one fellow said he was as honest as a lawyer who ever broke bread, and you can guess what that means. And he freely gave his time to tutor other young lawyers. He had an acute legal mind, and he believed in a good society and what factors were needed to develop it. He had a keen sense of social psychology. And unlike many in politics today, he kept his friends in New England for the rest of his life. In 1770, there was something called the Boston Massacre. You might have heard about it. 5 patriots or colonists were killed by British soldiers. And it's an interesting story. Everybody wanted to, pillory the soldiers and do everything. And John Adams said no one wants to defend them. And John Adams said, I'll defend them. And the soldiers were being taunted. They were being hit with snowballs and oyster shells packed in snow and rocks packed in snow. And somebody yelled fire, but it wasn't the commander of the unit. It was somebody. It could have been somebody. It probably was somebody in a crowd taunting the soldiers, and the soldiers fired, and 5 people died. That was the Boston Massacre. Now, everybody said, well, let's take those soldiers and, really send them to, see how guilty they were. Well, Adams proved that it wasn't the captain of the guard that fired fire. And he defended the soldiers successfully, and his business fell off because of that. Well, that's the way it happens. And then as the colonists were developing their strength for independence, Massachusetts was always a firebrand colonist. Many of them, I studied this a little bit. Everything happens in Massachusetts. So they went to Philadelphia and 2 trips to Philadelphia. The second one was in 1775, 56 founding fathers. And then when he was there, he wrote Abigail every day, and she was his intellectual equal. It was really nice. I mean, I didn't read the letter exchange. I don't know if it even exists, but it has to be very nice between him and Abigail. She was his intellectual equal. And in the Massachusetts delegation, he was known for his integrity and intellect and capacity for hard work. Many historians will say that John Adams was the biggest player of all 13 colonies to get unanimous signing of the Declaration of Independence, which was actually signed on July 2nd, 1776. John Adams believed that a Republican form of government needed to be built on a good system of checks and balances. Since his first involvement, though, in the revolution, he knew that they would never be settled peacefully and it would come to some sort of war or revolution. And the punishment for any conspirator, as the revolutionists were, was death by hanging. But even dealing with the unpopular British, Adams believed in decency and respect. And he said, many countries today, he believed in institutions. They have democracies, but are they really democratic? Russia has a vote, so does Turkey, and so does Hungary. And John Adams said, well, we have to develop democracy is okay, but we need to develop institutions to follow that democracy or support the democracy. And he believed that was just as important, if not more important, than democracy itself. He believed in holding the utmost, holding the Constitution was most important. His I guess you could say, adversary and the Times team member for most of his life was Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson believed in minimal central government. People could do things without government, and Adams strongly disagreed with that. We need government, but we need institutions. And so the drafters of independence, John Adams was probably more important than anybody else to make it happen. He had the clearest idea what independence from Britain meant, and not with the troubles and risks that lie ahead. And he believed in the separation of powers and all that other good stuff. He also understood that a republic was a product produced under the influence of biased men, which we all are, and understood that even with the highest virtue, you need something else. You need a republic of laws and institutions. And that's something, kind of a message that might resonate or should resonate today. He drafted the first set of rules for the Continental Navy. He was instrumental in getting George Washington to be in charge of the Continental Army. He suggested that Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. Now, Thomas Jefferson was a great man of science, but knew not that much about human nature while John Adams, on the other hand, knew a lot about human nature. He was, rubbing shoulders with people in Boston every day. The leading three thinkers of the day, Jefferson, Hamilton, and Adams. Adams stood apart because he was more urban, came from an urban background. Jefferson inherited his wealth and lived in a life of luxury, and it was built on slaves and tobacco plantation. And John Adams abhorred those things. Jefferson lived on a mountaintop in Virginia, Monticello. Adams lived and brushed shoulders with people of Boston every day. Thomas Jefferson tried to avoid a rough and tumble of life and let his mind pursue science. It's a brilliant mind, no doubt about that. But on the other hand, Adams became a student of human nature. Jefferson was tall and aristocratic. Adams was squat and a farmer lawyer. Jefferson criticized Adams for a certain want of taste. Well, and Thomas Jefferson had very little humor, and had humor. He was self-deprecating. But they both loved words and serious scholarship. They both shared a common vision for an independent America and a cause of devotion to the American cause. Uh, Jefferson believed that the nation's needs would be solved by agriculture. This was back in 1700s, late 1700s. Adams thought differently. He was more city thinking. Uh, Thomas Jefferson believed conflicts emanated from class struggles, and John Adams felt differently. He figured that society struggles could be managed by good institutions. Interesting. Of all the political thinkers identified with liberty, uh, John Adams believed diversity was a real good thing to keep the peace, while some people didn't believe that. And that's interesting and somewhat controversial today, but he believed overall diversity was a good thing. Uh, he needed the nation's character to be determined by the structure of its governments and its institutions. I think that's correct, but that was pretty far-sighted back in 1770. He knew that a country that fought a revolution was didn't have the support for it was a fiction without a foundation. He used his exact words: a fiction without a foundations. During the war years, he went to France trying to get, Benjamin Franklin was over there. He was trying to get the French to support us in the war, and he had a really harrowing trip. They got engaged fight with the British warship, and the storms were rough. And he got to France, and he found Ben Franklin schmoozing. But Ben Franklin was doing some good. I haven't given a talk on Ben Franklin yet, but he was quite different. And Adams couldn't deal with Franklin, his schmoozing. He was just not a diplomat. He didn't have the skills to be a good diplomat. He understood that. Came home, went back, and he went to Holland and tried to get money from the Dutch. And he got deathly ill there. And at first he was unsuccessful. Then he was successful after some American successes. And then he also brought Abigail to Paris, and they had a good time. Went back to Europe and became the first ambassador to Britain. Now, think about that. We just fought a war with you, and we're sending you our ambassador. So they didn't like him. He didn't like them. And he had some difficulties. And, in a sense, he was the first ambassador. It was awkward. He met King George III, and we were operating under the Articles of Confederation for about, I guess it was 8 years. After we didn't have the same constitution we have now. We had one president for a year, and they rotated, and all kinds of issues developed from that. And Britain probably was just waiting for us to fall apart, and we came close to it till we got back in 1787. Had the thing which Adams again contributed greatly to, and then after that conference, and that's a long subject, but the United States came together in 1787 with a new constitution, the constitution we have today. And George Washington was elected president, and John Adams put his legal profession on hold to be George Washington's vice president. And that was in 1789. And he developed some useful insights when his time in France and in England to help George Washington. And those two countries were at each other's throat back then. France just had a revolution, and they're fighting England. And, the United States doesn't want to become embroiled, and Washington doesn't know what to do. So he asked John Adams, how do we deal with this? And Adams had some good advice for him being there. And when he became president in 1796, it was the Electoral College came in existence, the same thing we have right now. He just won by 3 electoral votes, and that was even a smaller margin because we had a lot fewer states. Um, and he inherited all of George Washington's cabinet. He didn't change it, including Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State and Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of Treasury. And that could come back and haunt him. Um, as a U.S. president, he didn't behave like a typical politician or salesman. He was a more solitary president. Now, that's good for an artist or a poet, but for politics, it's not that good. So he had some issues. And then we had an experience with the Barbary pirates, with our ships were being stolen, the crews were being impressed in the other service. And this was done by after pirates off Tunisia and stuff during the thing. And the Marine Corps had already existed. They're one of the oldest service. I never heard the expression leatherneck. Well, they were another thing on there and the Barbary pirates were. That was during John Adams' administration. After the Revolutionary War, our Navy was pretty much disbanded. So we didn't have anything but the Marine Corps. And they took care of that. And he thought, so he was a president during that time. And he believed that, our Navy could really protect us from anything coming from across the Atlantic. And in the meantime, France and England were at war with each other. And there were a lot of people in his cabinet, namely Jefferson and Hamilton, who wanted to side with the French. And Adams wanted to stay out. He didn't want to side with the British either, but he just wanted to stay out of it. And we were on the brink of a war. And he created something that's very controversial. If you Google it, it's not very flattering to John Adams. It's called the Alien Sedition Acts. I think there were 4 of them. And they were basically to keep people from speaking their mind. He was afraid of a lot of pro-French protests, which he did not want. And Jefferson did. And he tried to do that. And it was very unpopular, but it did pass. And it basically made him very unpopular. And he caused problems in his cabinet, a cabinet that was inherited by George Washington. And then he faced some problems at home. One of his sons, Charles, two of his sons became alcoholics. I think and the other one was John Quincy Adams. But Charles died of alcoholism. So that's always rough on a parent. And at the end of his presidency, he moves into the White House in Washington, D.C. And when he moved in, he said something very, very, very good here. This is as he moved in the White House in about 1800. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. May none but honest and wise men rule under this roof. Wow. That was John Adams. And I don't know what we had, but I wonder. All right. Then John Adams is running for president for a second term in 1800 against the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson. And there was all Alien Sedition Acts that John Adams was a Federalist. Thomas Jefferson was a Democratic Republican, or those sometimes called Republican back then, but totally different from Republicans now. Adams, the Federalist, favored a strong central government, and Jefferson was more agriculture, agrarian oriented, much less so. And Hamilton and Jefferson joined forces to defeat John Adams in the election of 1800. So it was a very bitter election. And interesting, I read this somewhere, that's very good. In 1800, the leader who valued government and hated politics, John Adams, lost the opponent who despised government but stooped to politics, Thomas Jefferson. So him and Jefferson are really, they don't, to say they hate each other is a little too strong. But he goes on, as an older man, he loses his wife, Abigail, his dear wife. I mean, she was an intellectual giant like him. And he begins to write letters to Thomas Jefferson, trying to reconcile. Now, they don't email in those days, and mail took weeks, not longer.
No email.
No email back then. No, he said, I'll write a letter to Thomas Jefferson. I used to hate him. And then guess what? Jefferson wrote a letter back, and they became very fond friends over email, even though they hated each other 1800. This was 1818, 18 years later. And they become friends over letter writing. And they died on the exact same day, 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. And John Adams' last words were, Thomas Jefferson survives. But he didn't know that Thomas Jefferson had died earlier that morning. But they died 50 years. There's some magic in that. 50 years after the Declaration of Independence, they died on the exact same day.
Wow.
And hating each other, they started out working with each other later on, and they kind of like they're both brilliant, but went their separate ways, and then they got back together later in their life. It was very nice. Uh, and John Adams' legacies, I think there's some here that are very interesting. Uh, Even in his days, John Adams saw no relationship between wealth and hard work. That's interesting. Even in his day. Furthermore, John Adams knew that people have to be educated to participate in our democratic republic. Who else said that? Ben Franklin. He didn't say you have to be wealthy, you just have to be educated. You have to know your civics. And Adams knew that was very important too. Um, he was skeptical of the goodness of human nature. Being a lawyer and seeing a lot of nasty cases, he knew that human nature was not always, the greatest thing, and he needed to be oversight of good institutions to pave over the flaws of human nature, which other people didn't quite see it the same way he did. And then, he said a republic solely derived by virtue of men was not likely to work. It needed to be a republic of laws. A republic of laws. You can't say that enough times. A republic of laws is very important, not a republic of men. And he would always believe, he believed that there was always be conflict in society and the government, and the government's purpose was to control it. He was not a moralist, unlike many we have today, but he claimed he did not know the will of God. Like many people, they tell me they know the will of God. Well, John Adams, he was a very moral man, very, went to church and all that good stuff. But he said, I don't know what God wants. So he wasn't that, he was a moralist, but he didn't claim to know God's will. And he was leery of demagogues, especially demagogues in politics. And I'll be opening up for questions now. Anybody off the shelf or whatever. I've read a great book. I read a couple books by him, but this was the best one by David McCullough. And David McCullough died last year. Great guy. See that? And he's got his American history is always outstanding, and he's pretty easy to read, even though they're darn big books. But I'll open up for questions, sir, if you have any.
Okay. Well, I want to show the picture first before.
Okay, sure.
So this is the picture of John Adams with the courtesy of the Library of Congress. So that.
There's the days before they had cameras, so somebody just made,
Right. Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. I have some questions for you. Was there any indication in his early life that would hint to his later contributions?
Well, his dad was a preacher, and preachers often came to his house, and he thought most preachers were full of themselves. He was religious, but he didn't really care for preachers that much, and he was good at speaking, so he became a lawyer, and he got to see the underbelly of society. He did all kinds of legal cases, and he saw what people on the underside of life were capable of, and he got to know that. And he spent his life rubbing his shoulders with commoners in Boston. And one friend of his said about him, he's the honest lawyer who has ever broke bread. It means he was honest. Despite all that, he was a very honest man and upright.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about his family?
Yeah. As I said a few times, Abigail was his intellectual equal. That's saying a lot. And she took care of things when he was overseas in France and Holland. And she took care of the family. And she came from a pretty good family too. Her maiden name was Abigail Smith. And when he was in Philadelphia, he mailed Abigail every day. And the mail probably took 3 weeks to get to Boston. But they were intellectually equal. And he had 5 children. One girl died in infancy. His oldest daughter, Abigail Sr., died of cancer at 48. And his second son Charles died of alcoholism while he was president. But his second child and his first son became our 6th U.S. president. And I did a talk on him, John Quincy Adams.
Yeah, nice. Wow, thank you. And another question, what things are John Adams' legacy? And what advice would he likely give our nation today?
He'd say, keep our institutions. Don't like institutions like the press, civil service, especially the Department of Justice, the court systems. He knew that was very important. He knew people could be corrupted. He rubbed shoulders with people in Boston. He understood government needed a certain people needed oversight, and the democracy could be wrecked. Look at Russia, Belarus, Turkey, Hungary today. They have democracies, but they're not really good democracies. They're not healthy democracies at all. Not in Russia in any way. And he knew that could happen anywhere, and he needed good institutions in place to prevent that from happening. Now, if you start killing the institutions, oh boy, things get kind of rough. But he believed in institutions. He believed in a government of laws. And I think that's the most important thing we can take from John Adams.
Okay. We have a comment from the floor, but for some reason I could not get access.
I'll be happy to take any questions from the floor.
Yeah. Anybody, please, if you have any question, please let us know. You type it, we might be able to see it.
If not, send me an email later on. I'll answer it.
Okay, Catherine Creenan say, nice job, Rick. You know Catherine Creenan?
Yes, I do know Catherine Creenan. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
She say, nice job. So anybody else have any question, please feel free to put it in your platform that you are watching from now. So you spent a lot of time in compiling this story. How many books did you read, Rick?
Well, I listened to the DVD on by HBO, and I read this. And I hate to say this, but I get a lot of good information from children's books. If I want something quick and snappy, it's there. My subject next month is going to be Ernest Evans, who was a great naval commander, a full-blooded Indian in World War II, and he got killed in the Battle of Samar in the Philippine Sea. And there's not a whole lot written about him. And I hate going to Wikipedia. I just look for that for facts, with dates and stuff like that. So some are easier than others. This one was that's a good book. McCullough, I love David McCullough. He's one of my heroes. I have read his book on Truman, but they wouldn't make it today because people don't have the attention span. And a book, but I do spend as soon as I put this away, I'll be working on Ernest Evans, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to do after Ernest Evans. So I enjoy reading about these people. I more enjoy telling people about people who are American, made America great. Title of my 10th book. People that do tough things do the right thing in tough times, and Adams did. Adams fits that bill. Most everybody in all 30 of my previous podcasts, I think they fit that bill. Definitely the one next time about a Navy commander who didn't get many breaks through Annapolis and so forth, but he got the Medal of Honor and led Douglas MacArthur way to shore. No one heard about him. So that'll be next month.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you, and we have audience all the way to the end, and thank you so much, everyone, for watching us. And the video, it will still be in the same platform as you are watching now. If you need to review or refer a friend, feel free to tell them where you are watching us. We appreciate you and thank you so much. So we'll wait a few more minutes in case somebody else have any question. If not, I'll post the picture of Rick's book. It's Rick's banner. This is Rick's banner. While his book, They Made America Great, is on the right side. And you can find that book at rickrhodes.com.
And if you can't read, I got an audio book. $5 more.
Okay. Awesome. And if you need to reach out to me for any reason, I'll put my information here, my phone number, my email, my website. You can always reach out to me if you have any suggestion for Rick. Feel free to do that as well. So back to Rick's book. And I don't see any more comment, more questions. So Rick, so thank you so much.
Thank you
Um,
for the opportunity.
we appreciate you and we'll see you next month.
You got it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.